The warehouse is open. Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 41, up close and personal with the Flyers and the Devils. Stu Oxenhorn is our guest this time around. Easy for me to say. Senior Director of MeiGray Vintage and longtime Flyers collector. You can read Stu at S. Oxenhorn. Jam that together at MeiGray.com. Also, pleased to welcome for the very first time inside the warehouse, as it is, Filipe Costa, Authentication Associate, F. Costa, C-O-S-T-A. Jam that together at MeiGray.com. Stu, I'll get to you in a second. Filipe, welcome. You got to be super excited to join us in the warehouse.
No, absolutely. I mean, when I went to school for media and radio and podcasting, so it's nice to be doing a little bit of that here at MeiGray as well. So it's a lot of fun.
It's an honor to have you aboard. Stu, how are you? And welcome back, my friend.
I am doing pretty well. Not so, Flyers aren't doing as well, but I'm doing good.
We'll get to them in just a little bit. A lot going on in this podcast. We will talk about the Flyers and the Devils from a personal perspective, from a sweater perspective. Filipe, as we like to say, honors out. What excites you most about the upcoming / current NHL season as a game-worn sweater collector?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how the hobby in general and just how everything goes with the new jerseys. Because as we all know, it's no longer Adidas that's the producer of the jerseys for the NHL, but it's Fanatics this season. So far it seemed the same. We see the one big difference being the lack of dimples on the shoulders, but I haven't seen much issues on my part, at least, with this changeover so far.
Have you gotten up close and personal with them? And what can you tell us, even by the feel? I know collectors are anxiously awaiting sliding them on when those early sets come in. Everybody posts, everybody. I mean, social media is absolutely our friend. And it's like, hey, you know what? I love the wear. I love the this. I love the that. Or the piping on the interior part of the sleeve is a little irritant, kind of like an elementary school wool sweater that your grandmom got you and you only wore it for picture day. Any early vibe, Filipe?
Well, I will say one thing. Something that Fanatics did this season that hasn't been around the NHL since the era of Reebok, but they made the on ice product available at retail as well. Because during the Adidas came in 17-18, you couldn't get the Pro Stock the same way you could get with Reebok when they were selling the Edge 2.0s in the team stores and the NHL website. But now with Fanatics, they've stepped that up in that regard. I actually picked up a Devils Pro Stock from Fanatics, and there's really no difference, at least from what I can tell. The biggest thing I saw, and that was more something that from, I believe it was working with the Players Association, the players themselves, there is an added layer of fabric in the sleeves, the lower sleeves, that from what the players requested, just for a little bit more integrity on the sleeves themselves. So I think it should be interesting to see how the wear translates on those, because you have 2 layers of fabric to go through. Are we going to see more board burns show up on sleeves? We're going to see more holes because we have 2 layers of fabric that kind of rub against each other. It'll be interesting to see, but otherwise, I haven't seen a discernible difference. Jersey feels the same, still feels good. I think it's fine.
Stu, your comment on the point that Filipe just brought up, and it's a really good one. With the double layer of stuff on the sleeves, it's also going to be interesting to see what equipment managers do with repairs. Do you go in and don't just do a Band-Aid repair on the top? Because it's an impossibility to cut it and then suture up layer 1. This is going to be like multiple layers of skin. I mean, I like that from a wear perspective. I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's to be determined. I agree. I think a lot of the teams, and the Devils and the Flyers were teams that were doing this, were putting those inside iron repairs in there. So that's not going to happen if there's a hole in the top and then there's nothing in the inside one. So you wonder on those repairs, do they actually sew them up? And we get more sew repairs this season.
Stu, what's your early vibe on, just a personal kind of, like it? It's fine. I didn't notice much of a difference either. And, I'll let you know when set 1 comes in.
Yeah, basically, I'll let you know when set 1 comes in. I mean, I haven't seen much of a difference. I have held a couple of the jerseys, but nothing really stood out at me on really any difference. I mean, I think they'll be fine. I don't think there's going to be any difference from, this year to last year, except, Filipe's right about the 2 layers of fabric. see how that
In the
holds up.
warehouse. Volume 41, and we want them to hold up quite nicely. And actually, I'm lying. We want them to be shredded because the more repairs, the better. Depends on it's personal preference. You know, it's a salad bar. You want the beets, take the beets. You want the coleslaw, take the coleslaw. If you just like lettuce, have the lettuce. Why is it always a food thing? Up close and personal with the Flyers and the Devils, joined by Stu Oxenhorn, Senior Director of MeiGray Vintage, and Filipe Costa, Authentication Associate over at MeiGray. Filipe, you collect modern and vintage. I'm putting words in your mouth. I know Stu is more of a vintage guy, but if there's something out there that makes sense, we'll get to him in a split second. How are you approaching the collection from a collector's standpoint for this season?
I'm kind of just watching what the Devils do this year in terms of the players and how they perform. I mean, you've got your regulars that are always the big performers on the Devils. You know, the Jack Hughes, the Nico Heishers, the Dougie Hamiltons of the world. But they've got a couple new pickups in terms on the roster. You know, Jacob Markstrom's manning the net now. You have a guy like Paul Cotter who came in, you know, grindy type of guy, but scores a pretty good clip for the kind of role he plays. Nason is back in the fold. He was with the Devils a few years back. So I'm just kind of watching what the players, how the players play and how well they do. I mean, even just this past Friday, watching the Devils play against the Capitals, it was that 6-5 overtime win for the Capitals.
Mm-hmm.
Even just looking at Dougie Hamilton's jersey mid-game, you already see, because he's a guy that's always shoulders always on the boards up against other players. There's already a massive board burn up against the number 7 on his sleeve, and I was pointing it out to my girlfriend, saying like, you know, that's the kind of stuff we look for when we're trying to match it and everything. But like, you know, I do like wear on jerseys. I have a Dougie Hamilton jersey already from a couple seasons ago. He's a guy that was wearing 3 per game, 1 per period, because he sweats a ton.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that, I mean, he's got great wear on that left sleeve. The right sleeve, not a ton, but you know, seeing how the players play, because I've noticed, at least with the Devils, the seasons they haven't been so great. Not a ton of wear, not a ton of, you know, burns and repairs on the sleeves. But 22-23 rolled around, and I mean, there's the Heishers jerseys were pretty hammered, all things considered. Even Jack Hughes jerseys had some wear on them. So I'm kind of just keeping an eye on how the team plays, and it kind of tends to translate in terms of, you know, which guy am I going to look for wear, and which guy I want to look for just in terms of performance and statistics.
Filipe, so just to sort of encapsulate or reiterate, it's kind of has it always been a take it as it come strategy, for lack of a better term? Or are there some seasons where you're like, I know something big is going to happen, and I got to get on this early?
You know, it really depends. I remember probably the best example of getting on something early a few years back was when Dawson Mercer was going to debut for the Devils. You know, I love the way he played. I watched a lot of his stuff when he was playing up in the Q in the CHL, and I'm just like, this kid looks like he's going to be great for the Devils. I mean, he's going to be really fun to watch, and I'm just like, I got to get something of his. And then, you know, 3 years later, I've got plenty of his jerseys. So, you know, Seamus Casey looks great. Stu's probably going to roll his eyes when I talk about that, but you know, kid looks great. He's playing well, and he's hopefully a staple of the team. So that's a guy that I'm really looking forward to. But otherwise, it's just the usual suspects. You know, I mean, Jack is Jack, Nico is Nico, but trying to kind of figure out who I like the most and who I just kind of want to take a flyer on and just have like a nice, interesting piece for a season.
And a nice segue as we switch back to the Flyers. Mr. Oxenhorn, strategy for you, how are you approaching? And again, at times it's like, I'm just going to lay back and let the season play. Or, I mean, there's a guy in goal, lots of buzz, and there's a guy out there free-ranging it, and people are super high on him. The time is yours, as Andy Reid would say.
Yeah, I mean, I go into pretty much every season with the Flyers. Mainly, my main goal in my collection is to get that home road and third, you know, every season, you know, sort of to complete the styles. So I'll definitely go into this season. I'm looking for a home road and third. Then I'll just try to decide. And a lot of times I'll wait, but I may jump on that Michkov wagon and pick one up sooner rather than later. But I'll definitely look at the different players and, you know, see which players I like and such. But for the most part, I'll wait. But definitely looking to get that home road and third. I did pick up, and this is sort of embarrassing, I shouldn't even say this on the air, but I did pick up my first jersey of the year, and it was a Devils jersey. And it was Seamus Casey. I got the one out of NHL auctions just to sort of fit that side collection of Michigan players that played there when my daughter was there.
I was going to say, so that would fit under sort of the next question of, is there a moment, is there a player? But you're on him. You mentioned Michkov. I mean, I would imagine from a MeiGray perspective, there's a lot of buzz inside of the business, and there's a lot of buzz amongst Philly collectors that you know and talk to and relate to and have relationships with. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. There's, I mean, this kid's, nothing like him has really come to the Flyers since Lindros. And in the MeiGray era, nobody like has made this kind of impact since 0203 when MeiGray took over the program from Philly. Yeah, he's a lot of fun. We've had a lot of requests. I'm on the request list, just like everyone else. And I know we started making those request calls, and I think we've sold the first couple. And we'll go from there. But yeah, he's a big buzz in the office right now.
Filipe, you mentioned the eye roll. You mentioned the Casey. Is Stu a renowned Flyers fan and Flyer collector? Is he getting a lot of crap around the office for the purchase?
No, I mean everyone knows he's a Michigan guy, and Seamus Casey is like the guy from Michigan since Luke joined. And me and Stu talk about it, and I think Stu was always the one that had the most intel on how good these guys are because he sees them play. But I know when he was first drafted, there was a lot of buzz going around him, and then I just kind of went to Stu and it's like, I want to get your opinion and your idea on it because you're the guy for me. But not too much. I think we all know that we have players on other teams that we like. I mean, I'm a big Adam Henrique fan, and he I have a few of his Anaheim Ducks jerseys, and I've been looking at possibly some of his Oilers jerseys. And sometimes the people you like the most, they don't tend to be on the team you support the most, which I think is another fun aspect of collecting.
Aside from Casey going in to the season, was there some sort of milestone or moment that you're like, as far as the Devils go, Filipe, I gotta remain aware of what happens when it happens?
Just seeing, Mercer is my main guy right now, and the guy that I've been really focusing on, seeing what he does, little by little going through the season. I know Hischier has yet to score a hat trick, so I'm always keeping an eye on that because he's come close a few times the last few years. Jack already got one a couple years ago, and Jesper Bratt already got one, and they're like the big, two of the big three. So really kind of seeing, if Hischier gets that big game where he finally scores that hat trick, that's always something I'm keeping an eye on.
The Devils have been sort of, to equate it to the NFL, they've been like the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not this year, but they were like the sexy pick of waiting to turn, and they're going to need something. And then Markstrom comes to town, and Tatar is there. And again, Tatar, which we mentioned earlier, incredibly popular with collectors no matter where he goes, and scuffs it up and scores some memorable goals and what have you. But over to you for a second, Stu. It's been a minute since Philly has had sustained success. Does the team rising and falling affect your collection barometer or desire to collect barometer? You're like, look, I'm going home road in third, but if they make a deep playoff run, there's going to be more because I want a piece of this.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, if they're playing really well, yeah, you're definitely looking to buy more. There's more moments that happen during the season that you're looking at. And if they're playing poorly, depending on the Flyers, like when I first started collecting, even if that team wasn't that good, I mean, they still gave effort. And even if they're giving effort, I'm still in. The problem and the problem really is the last maybe 15 years here and there is sometimes these Philly teams just don't seem to be giving that effort. And that's the only time I may wane a little. But I'm still getting that home road third specialty jersey, whatever it is, anything different, jersey with a patch, that's mainly what I'm looking to pick up now, and just to keep that collection going in that regard. But yeah, if they're playing well, yeah, you're looking for that deep playoff run and, saving that money, banking that money for that Stanley Cup final shirt.
Of course, I know it well. Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 41. A boy can dream. A collecting boy can dream. Up close and personal with the Flyers and the Devils as we are a week, 10 days, 2 weeks into the season already. Stu Oxenhorn, nice enough to join us inside the warehouse for Volume 41, Senior Director of MeiGray Vintage, longtime Flyers collector, and a Michigan guy at heart. Oxenhorn at MeiGray.com. Filipe Costa for the first time. Nice to have him aboard. A media guy at heart, which we always love. Authentication associate inside of MeiGray. F. Costa at MeiGray.com. Boys, turning to any games, rivalries sort of thing, special moments ahead. I don't have the complete outdoor schedule in front of me. Filipe, we'll start with you. Anything you're particularly excited about from a collecting perspective headed into the season?
While neither of the outdoor games this season interest me in terms of the teams that there are because I don't collect them, I think the Winter Classic is Chicago and St. Louis, while the Stadium Series is going to be Detroit and Columbus. I'm just interested to see what they do with that because we always see the Winter Classic, always a lot of throwbacks, a lot of callbacks to the history of the team, whether it's the team directly or any franchises that they've represented in the past. And then this, when you turn to the Stadium Series, you always see something newer, fresher. They take a little bit more of a risk with what they do. And I'm most interested, to be honest, to see what Detroit does. Detroit's a very classic franchise, original six. They don't mess around too much with their jerseys. They've done a Stadium Series in the past. I think it was pretty cool what they did. I think they played Colorado. They had like a almost like a skating D for Detroit on the front. So I'm interested in what they do because they don't mess around with it. They know the brand. They really know what represents Detroit. That winged wheel is Detroit. So I'd love to see what the designers come up with and what the team writes signs off on because Chicago, I mean, they've had such a long history. St. Louis has some interesting teams that they can call back to. And Columbus, they're a more modern franchise compared to the rest of the teams that are going to be outdoors. So you can definitely play around a little bit more with them. But I'm interested to see how Detroit reinvents the wheel, so to speak, going forward.
Well stated. Stu, over to you on the outdoor or the rivalry or the, something on the schedule. You're like, I might be interested here.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing on. I don't think there's anything on the Flyers schedule that is really piquing me right now. But the outdoor games do have a little appeal to me. Um, Again, with the Michigan angle, Columbus playing. There are some Columbus players I'd be interested in possibly getting a different, unique jersey from, Fantilli or Kevin Brindley, somebody like that. But just got to worry about if they do some Ohio State theme. Forget that. That's going to go out the window. Um, and Michigan themselves are playing at Wrigley a couple days after the Winter Classic. So I'm threatening my daughter to crash on her couch and go to the game.
I think that's an excellent idea, and auctions be damned following that one. Stu has been around and a guest and spoken about his collection through the years, and I'll get back to him in a second. But Filipe, being that it's your first time here, is there a most memorable sweater? And it could be Devils inside the collection or outside of the collection. Is there a most memorable piece that you've acquired? And it doesn't have to be a star player. I always love the stories of, actually, I got a fourth liner or I got a bottom tier defenseman, but it means something, or, he made a memory, or I went to a game with blank, play Mad Libs for me, please.
I would have to say probably right now one of the jerseys that I like the most in my collection. It's Adam Henrique's white set 3 playoffs jersey. His rookie season 2011-12 jersey he wore. He wore it. He scored 2 overtime winners against Florida in the first round, won the series in overtime, and I mean it was a performance that he's never. Henrique's always been a great guy, great player. One of my favorite players, just because he's my family's from Portugal. I'm Portuguese. He's also of Portuguese descent, so it's always nice to see someone kind of representing that in the league. And I've kind of fell in love with him because of that, and to have his jerseys. But that playoff run for the Devils was just very unexpected, and the way he played. I mean, just go back to the "It's Over" goal with Doc Emmerich. I don't have that jersey because that was a home game against the Rangers, but having that away jersey from that playoff run and then beating the Rangers and beating the Rangers series on the anniversary of the '94 series that the Devils lost, I think that piece really stands out a lot to me. I guess honorable mention would go to Dawson Mercer's rookie debut. It's he wore it for a few different games. It's the jersey he wore when he scored his first career point and his first career goal as well. But I think that Henrique one, that away jersey from his rookie year in the playoffs is pretty special in that regard.
Stu, you've been kind enough to share your collection through the years, as far as the personal stuff goes, at the MeiGray Expo up in Raritan. And is there a piece that's standing out? I much like Filipe, there are pieces in my modest collection where I'll always love certain ones, but then I'll just be drawn. I'll be like, oh, you know what? Not I forgot I had this. It's like forgetting a kid, although who hasn't done that? But you're like, oh, I yes, this one. And then you pull it out and you're like, I want to do a little homework on this. And it renews the affection. Is there something you've stumbled upon in the Oxenhorn closet of late?
I'll try not to draw this out, but and I was going to keep this with a more modern jersey, but the more I think about it, it's the story of the jersey. One, I've never bought a jersey from a player. I never approached a player about buying his jerseys or anything like that. But back at the National, back in like 2002, maybe 2003, somewhere back there, before I worked at MeiGray, I met Dave Schultz, and I had known that he had sold one of his jerseys recently to a collector that was on the Game Worn forum that we were all on back then. And we started talking, and I mentioned to him that I knew he had sold one of his jerseys and was asking him did he have any others. And he's like, oh, I've got a couple. I said, well, I'd be interested in one of them if you'd like to sell it. And the one he sold was his 75 Stanley Cup Finals shirt. I said, I'd pay more for just any of your shirts than what you sold that one for. And it aroused him, and he took my number, and eventually he called me, and eventually he said, I have one available. I don't know what it is. I don't know when I wore it. I know I did wear it, but if you want it, you could have it. I would sell it to you. So I bought that shirt. He gave me his address. I went over his house. And again, looking at it, I thought it was from probably 74, 75. It had light wear. And again, he had no idea when he wore it. The only thing he did is he signed a photo for me to Stu, enjoy the game worn jersey, Dave the Hammer Schultz, and gave me the photo. And he said, the photo I know is from the playoffs at the start of against Toronto at the start of the 75 playoffs. And I said, oh. So I leave, and it was actually the day I was driving up to go to one of Mike Hogan's expos in Boston. And I'm sitting at a light, and I'm looking at the photo, and I'm looking at the jersey, and I'm like, damn, it's the same jersey. There were two threads coming off the crest, and the crest was crooked. Now, he said that photo was definitely from the 75 playoffs against Toronto. I was like, okay, we'll start from there. And just in doing the homework, doing the research, doing everything, turns out he actually wore 3 different road jerseys during the 75 playoffs. He wore this jersey, which was a large. He wore an extra large. And then he wore a jersey with a name on the back. They first played Toronto. He wore this jersey in one game against Toronto. The other jersey was the extra large. In the Islanders series, which was next, he wore the extra large and the one with the name on the back. The name on the back, they were the TV games. So if there was a TV game, they would have a name on the back. And then in the Buffalo series, he wore the extra large. And then in one game, he wore this jersey again, which was the night they won the cup.
Oh, my. And by the way, you could draw that out. Can I ask questions like more?
Sure.
About it? I mean, that's an amazing story. I've not heard that in its entirety, and thank you for sharing that. So just start me back here. When you go to Dave Schultz's house, do you bring like a bottle of wine? Do you bring flowers? Does somebody meet you does he meet you in the driveway? Or he's like, hey, Stu, nice to meet you. Just wait in the garage. Or do you go into the foyer and you look around and you go, again, I was lucky enough to work in sports media. If I would ever go to somebody's house, I would just, you want me to take my shoes off? I'd be all mousy and respectful, or it's, hey, come on in, let's sit, talk, and whatever. Or I'll meet you at the mailbox. Do not drive up my driveway, Oxenhorn. That's not happening. And, that's a wonderful, wonderful story and a great experience, my friend.
He's always been very gracious to me. I had met him quite a few times before. He was at the time he was just getting into sports memorabilia himself, working with another company. So I had met him quite a few times, and that transaction on the phone, there were probably 5 phone calls. And then through the years, we've just, after I started working at MeiGray and, doing everything there, we bump into each other all the time. So he's always been gracious to me. I was actually there for like 2 hours that day, just talking and stuff. And
chicken salad sandwiches and
pretty much. I mean, and that's the only, to be honest, I don't have I don't have player stories like that. That's the only one. So that makes it all that special.
Thing.
I've never gone tracking down players, done that kind of stuff too much, except through work. That happens, but not personally.
That's tremendous. Again, thank you for sharing. That's going to be a soundbite. As they say on SportsCenter, that's going to make our top 10 for sure. Filipe Costa, Authentication Associate of MeiGray. Stu Oxenhorn, Senior Director of MeiGray Vintage, longtime Flyers collector. Nice enough to join us for Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 41, up close and personal. Talking Flyers, Devils, past and present, and looking ahead to the future. Filipe, over to you. Talk to me a little bit about the value of game-worn sweaters and evolution, especially for the rising stars, because, again, when you look at the Jags, there's a bleep ton of the future right there, right in front of you, and then you pile in Mr. Casey.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see where the Devils will end up because I love the player. It's not that he didn't work out, but there were other opportunities that the Devils chased down. But Yegor Sharangovich was projected to be, one of the guys for the Devils going forward. Great goal scorer and everything. Before the beginning of the 23-24 season, he's traded to Calgary for Tyler Toffoli. Toffoli stayed here for maybe a season and ended up signing to San Jose. He's still a great player and he's doing well in Calgary, but everyone was like, oh yeah, this is going to be the guy, he's going to be the right wing that's going to play next to Jack Hughes for, the next 5-6 years. He's part of the core, and players move like that. Then you have the opposite where you have a guy like Jack Hughes who everyone has, for the most part, people see it's like, okay, he's the guy. He's been, and we've seen with what has sold through MeiGray and what has sold on auctions and everything. His price has continued to stay for the most part pretty steady, but slowly, little by little, getting up there. And especially the more and more he performs, and the more he starts to kind of live up to those expectations. And then you have Nico Hischier, who can sometimes have an interesting relationship with the fan base, because this is a franchise. I mean, Devils have only been around 40 years. It's a long time relatively, but compared to the rest of the league, they're still a little young. But a lot of the people that when you talk about Devils captains, people think of Scott Stevens, Niedermayer, Zach Parise, even Andy Green, and Hischier has gotten a little bit of criticism because people expect him to be the same kind of captains as those guys are. But at the same time, the last few years, I mean, he missed out on a Selke in the 22-23 season only because Patrice Bergeron beat him out. I mean, you can't really expect to beat him out at that point, but
Sure.
he's a player that for a bit didn't sell as well, and not as many collectors were getting his shirts, to now, people are looking for him all the time. I know, you see plenty of people asking like, oh, does anyone have a Hischier available, especially with the C and everything? And he's a guy it's taken a little bit longer. He was a first overall pick, but no, he ended up getting picked ahead of guys like, Cale Makar and Miro Heiskanen, and Elias Pettersson, who people think and realistically are better players than him. But now at this point, he's coming into his own. He's being that captain and that figure, that voice in the room, and more people are looking at him like, oh yeah, he's a guy going forward, and he's a guy that people have been, a lot more paying more attention to what he's been doing and paying more attention to his jerseys. So you go from really having a ton to now it's a little bit more scarcity and a little bit more stuff in the closet as opposed to on the racks over at MeiGray.
Philippe, you mentioned a little earlier in the podcast in this volume 41, Dougie Hamilton sweaters and noticing with your girlfriend like what it looks like already on the shoulder. Are you an in-person game guy? And when you go, will that trigger? I mean, that's the best part. I love, and again, I've said this before. Said it to Jeff Spade last time out. I love the "That's my sweater. He's just wearing it" tagline, and it's meant. It's a great motivator for purchasers. I mean, again, look no further than the Washington Capitals pre-order where you guys had X number, 40 something, and at last check, there were only 2 or 3 left, and people are just all over them. I credit the tagline, I credit a 50th patch, I credit a monumental, pardon the pun, and momentous season ahead, but there are a lot of people who love the MeiGray way of go to the game and see that guy putting wear and marks and getting stitches and bleeding and puck marks and whatever. Are you an in-person guy?
Oh, absolutely. I love it. I mean, when I reached out just before I was working here and got put my name down for Mercer's debut, I was there for his NHL debut, which was his first point. I was there for his first career goal, and I'm sitting there, and it's just this just great feeling of just like that's my shirt. He did that in my shirt. It's awesome, and like a great story I think of too because I've spoken to a few of my friends and I actually had one of mine that reached out and he's like, "Hey, I'm interested in getting something. He wanted to get Kevin Ball's playoff jersey from the 2023 playoffs." And I told him like, here's Drew's email. Reach out to him. He'll talk to you and everything. He'll give you the rundown. And as the playoffs in that first round against the Rangers are happening, I think he gets into a fight at one point, and I just get a text message from him. It's like, "Dude, I'm watching it on TV. He's fighting this guy. That's my jersey right there." And I'm like, yeah, you see the appeal now, and what's so awesome about getting the jersey as the season's going through, and it can be hard to describe to someone without them actually getting involved in it, but then once they get involved into that point, they come back to you and they're like, "I never understood what you were talking about, but now that I'm here, I'm like, I'm sitting down in my seats and I'm looking down at him wearing that jersey, and I'm like, I'm gonna have that jersey in a few months." So I think it's something really cool. It's a really cool feeling too.
Stu, I think you're at Simone Nolet's debut game. So I kid. You're still going to as many, and what's the vibe from the game worn sweater relationship when you do go there in person?
I don't get to as many games these days, but yeah, I still like. I mean, I still like the whole concept. I still, if I do pre-order a shirt, I will definitely be watching. But just as much on TV as gone to the games. I love the idea of people gone to the games and having that attachment. It's never been quite me. Actually, I'll give you a quick story, and it's recent. But we hired a new shipping guy recently, Dave, and he went to Prague for the Devils series against the Sabres. And he's never bought a game worn jersey before. But he went to Prague and he got engaged while he was in Prague. So he was at the games, he got engaged, and now he's going to get he's going to have a Devil shirts to hang on his wall for him and his wife. So, I mean, that's just awesome to me. And just you were there, you were at the games, collecting the jersey from the games, you got engaged. I mean, everything. It's such a personal, memory you're always going to have. Yeah, it's never been me in that regard. But I do love, if I do pre-order one, watching it, definitely I like that. But I've never been that at the game kind of guy. Oh, I was at that game. I need to get that jersey. But it is cool though.
I asked Philippe to pull out his crystal ball a little bit ago, Stu. I'll ask you the same thing as far as the value. And again, it's always a tough game to play. It's like, you know what? I don't know. I mean, again, collect because you want to collect. If you want to invest, there are a lot of different ways to do this, and it's a hobby first and foremost, but a lot of people do like to play the game. As far as the value of the game worn sweaters and the evolution, especially for the young stars, taking a look at Philadelphia, for instance.
Yeah, I've always been bad at that. It just seems like every time I think of this would be a great guy to invest in, he sent down to the minors, never to be seen again. But yeah, no, there is a definite potential value. I think the important thing is collect within your means. Don't go outside your means. I think that's really important. You don't want to get too carried away. But if, and also you got to learn to separate. A lot of people, a lot of collectors will be like, get frustrated when, they try to do both on the same player, the player they like, and then the player that you think, he could be a good investment. I think what you need to do is if you want to invest in game worn jerseys, there's a way to do it. And people have done it, and people have done it really well, and people have made a lot of money. And there's also a way, if you want to have fun with it as a hobby, collect what you like, collect the players you like. I think overall through the years, you'll benefit. These things haven't gone, I've been collecting for 30 some years, and I just, for the most part, put my kid through college on game worn jerseys. So I think there's always that upside. But you got to be smart about it. You can't just think everything's going to go up in value. It's not, especially, young rookies that you think are great or whatever now. If you're going to collect those, great. I do. But I collect them like Shane Gostisbehere, when he was with the Flyers. I loved watching his rookie season. I just loved watching him play. I had to have one, and I bought one. And do I regret it? No. I didn't buy it because I thought he was going to be the next great thing. I bought it because I was really enjoying him play. Now, with Michkov, different story. I think he is going to go up in value. I think he is a good investment. And, and I'm going to enjoy watching him play. So there is the both there. But, I think you can't go wrong. If you have your head on, if you're just thinking rationally.
That's the key. Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 41, up close and personal with the Flyers and the Devils. We talked a couple of pods ago when Jim and Stu were nice enough to join Filipe, and we talked about what they missed from the early days. And as Stu mentioned, he's been collecting for 30-some-odd years, knock on wood, as have I, and we miss mall shows and fax auctions. We love the fact that there are still expos right here in Northern Virginia. MeiGray puts on a legendary one. St. Louis just had theirs. They're all over the place. LA's coming up. They're when they come into your area, you should go. Talk to me, Filipe, about your sort of vibe or relationship with the collector community and your experience. Again, I don't know when it is that you started, but maybe you're just a collector and you're like, the community experience. I know it's there. I know it's good, but I'm still finding my way. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started, I want to say, a little bit after 17, 18, realistically, and kind of finding my way through it and meeting more people and getting to know more people. Obviously, the online aspect. The forums aren't really a thing anymore, but there's the Facebook groups and other social media platforms, and even something as simple as like Jeff, for example. I met Jeff beforehand. We knew each other before either of us worked at MeiGray, and over time became good acquaintances. And then I started working here, we see each other every single day. Other guys, I've made some good friends that there's a one collector, John Gustino, up in Boston. He's my age. Not Boston, Buffalo. Up in Buffalo, my age. He'd probably kill me after saying that. But we got to know each other because he's one of the unicorn of fans, a Sabres, Rangers, and Devils fan. But we got to know each other because he would.
By the way, it's come on now.
But we got to know each other pretty well, and we've become very close friends to a point where when the eclipse happened in a few months back, me and my girlfriend made plans to go up there, and I kind of mentioned it, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna take the weekend off to hang out with you and show you around Buffalo." And I'm just like, he didn't have to do that.
Right.
But he took the time to do that. Took us to Bar Bill. We had some absolutely amazing wings. Um, but like it's fun, it's interesting, and you start to learn. Jim and Stu have both told me a lot about those fax auctions. Interestingly enough, up until I want to say 2020, Calgary Flames still did something similar. Instead of a fax, you'd shoot them an email, give them a list of everything you want, in priority, and then they shoot you an email back and say, "All right, here's what's available." They've since changed that then, but that was such an interesting experience and like a part of the hobby that I'm in a way it was a little frustrating because it was harder to get what I wanted, but at the same time, it was just an interesting experience. But being able to meet different people with similar interests and everything, I mean, it's like watching any other sport. You know, anyone that I know that plays or watches soccer, I love talking to them. And anyone that collects jerseys or anyone that I could introduce to the hobby, I love talking to them. And I think that's the beauty of, you know, even just having this job and being able to work at a company like this. It's it's an experience at the end of the day, and I think it's done a lot for me personally. And I hope I have, being in the hobby and being in my position, I've hoped I've done something for others as well.
It's definitely a people giving, people exchanging, and again, you know, Stu and I have talked about it ahead of the MeiGray Expo, which I know is his favorite because that is like his kid, and he gets to set up, and he gets to break down, and he gets to just look at it proudly, and I'm putting words in his mouth. Stu, we've all seen the meme guy or the meme out there with the change my mind. What's your most controversial, like don't at me opinion on game worn sweaters in 24-25, sir?
Um, it- it's going to be ad patches, and I don't care. You know, it's like I don't know what the big deal is. I honestly don't. You know, and I guess a lot of older collectors, it's like the end of the world. But it's like I don't care. You know, now here's the other controversial part: is if me and my political head sometimes, if you did have an advertiser of a company that I wasn't a fan of, I probably wouldn't buy that jersey. You know,
Okay.
so, but yeah, that's probably my take. Is just ad pat. I don't care. I mean, it doesn't bother me. Even in some ways, I like them. I mean, going back to the Michigan thing, I still haven't picked up a Manny Beniers shirt. I know they had the patch. I believe it was last year with the indigenous people. I love that patch. That's the one I'm gonna. If I get when I get the Beniers, that's the one I'm gonna get. I'm gonna get one of those.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool patch. So yeah, it just the ad patches is the one where I don't care. I mean, I think some of them are
There
cool.
it is.
The Flyers
Change my
one's kind of
mind.
boring.
I like ad patches, and they're here to stay, and I'm okay with it. Signed, S. Oxenhorn, Oxenhorn at MeiGray.com. Philippe, what's your most controversial take for this coming season on Game On Sweaters?
I It's not as much on sweaters themselves, but I feel like the hobby as a whole. And I think you don't need to be friends with everyone. You know, like you can see that obviously it's human nature. You're not going to get along with everyone. You're not going to be friends with everyone. You don't need to stick your neck out for, you know, every person that comes along, but you also don't need to be incredibly negative and closed off from everyone. And I do feel like and just with any sort of kind of group effort and things where people come together, people feel like you need to take a side in that respect when really just, you know, just be respectful, be cordial when you can. If you disagree with someone and you don't like them, that's perfectly fine. It happens and stuff like that. But I do feel like there's a little bit of tribalism that kind of seeps through sometimes. It's perfectly fine. It's just I feel like people get a little bit more invested in those little micromanagement and the personal level of it when at the end of the day we are collecting used polyester. So, you know, just kind of take a step back, get a little bit of perspective, but also, you know, if something rubs you the wrong way, take a deep breath and move on. Sometimes I've gotten frustrated sometimes with, you know, if a sale doesn't happen or something crops up on eBay that I wanted to buy and then suddenly, you know, it's gone before I can click, you know, check out and I see someone else bought it and is now selling it for twice the price. It's going to frustrate me, but I'm like, I'm not going to go after that guy and lampoon him or lampoon her and just go like, oh, this guy's terrible. They're awful. They're pox on the hobby. It is what it is. Just, you know, we're all people. Just kind of go about your day if you really need to. But it does kind of seem like people need to take sides sometimes. But if that's your prerogative, that's your prerogative. For me personally, I just go with the flow.
Enjoy the hobby. Excellent advice. I appreciate that. Change my mind. Just chill. Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 41, Flyers, Devils. If there are pre-orders to be made, contact sales at MeiGray.com. If you have questions, because both these men are quite knowledgeable, not only about the franchise, but the history and the wear and the sweaters, and they'll talk to you because, as Philippe said, this is a people hobby. He's quite correct. F. Costa at MeiGray.com. Reach out to Stu. He loves getting email. Oxenhorn at MeiGray.com. Gentlemen, thank you for being part of Tales from the Warehouse Volume 41. Until next time, I'm Scott, for Filipe and Stu. The warehouse is closed.